Part 26. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 254. Kurosawa Hikaru's true words and feelings are fully revealed. After hearing these words, Ninomiya Chizuru forgot that she was sitting on the ground and looked at this man in confusion. Xiaoyuki, calm down and think about it. Ask yourself whether you can accept the real me. At the same time, Kurosawa Hikaru saw that little Yuki in his arms had not moved, so he gently held her shoulders with his hands and reminded him softly. As he spoke, he gently pushed Xiaoyuki away from his arms, allowing her to make a judgment as calmly as possible. Coming out of his arms, Yuki Ichino's eyes and nose were very red because she was crying. Don't make choices that go against your heart. Life is still long. Kurosawa Hikaru looked into her tearful beautiful eyes, feeling a little distressed and guilty, but he still said, Stand up first. Immediately, Kurosawa Hikaru walked towards Ninomiya Chizuru, who had been sitting on the ground. Because she had cried bitterly, her hair was stuck to the tears, and she was no longer as noble and dignified as before, but instead looked a little messy and embarrassed, and stretched out her hand. Kurosawa, have you ever loved me? Ninomiya Chizuru looked at the hand he stretched out, the long, white and smooth hand that had fascinated her for many days and nights. Instead of shaking hands, she asked. I love you for real and it hasn't changed yet. Faced with this problem, Kurosawa Hikaru looked at her face crying because of him, feeling very distressed and bitter. If he could, he really didn't want to see Miss Ninomiya like this in his whole life. Then do you love me more, or do you love her more? Ninomiya Chizuru met his affectionate eyes, and then looked at Ichino's Yuki aside. My love is divided into 3 parts. They are all of the same weight. There will be no partiality. No one will have more than anyone else. This question is difficult to answer, but Kurosawa Hikaru still has to answer it. Ninomiya Chizuru opened her mouth when she saw him finish what he said, but now it doesn't make much sense to ask more questions. Stand up first. This choice is very important. I have thought about it for a long time before choosing this day. So I don't expect you to make a choice immediately, but it is best before the end of this archery competition. Kurosawa opened his hand to her and confessed. Hearing these words, Ninomiya Chizuru nodded, finally stretched out her hand, held his palm, and was pulled to stand up. Brother Guang. At this moment, Yuki Ichino's finally spoke. Realizing that she had something to say, Kurosawa Hikaru withdrew his hand and looked at Xiaoyuki. Was your first kiss mine or hers? Yuki Ichino's eyes touched his lips and she couldn't help but ask. Is yours? Faced with this question, Kurosawa Hikaru looked at Ninomiya Chizuru in front of him, and after hesitation, he answered truthfully. Since this is a time for truth-telling, don't hold anything back about these things. After finally breaking the lie, in the face-to-face moment, if they lie again, even if they are coaxed, it will be like laying a landmine that may be stepped on at any time. This answer elicits different reactions. Ichino's Yuki was surprised and satisfied, while Ninomiya Chizuru's body couldn't help but tremble. Then I've thought about it. After receiving this answer, a smile appeared on Ichino's Yuki's crying face and he said. So soon? You can think about it more seriously. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't expect that she would be satisfied with just one question, and was a little stunned. No need, I've already thought about it. Ichino's Yuki shook her head, looking at Kurosawa Hikaru's face that made her dream, she already had a decision in her heart. After that, she also took steps and rushed towards Kurosawa Hikari again, rushing into his arms. This charge was so powerful that Kurosawa's body was shaken by the impact. He is not easily shaken. If he stands upright, he is afraid of hurting Xiaoyuki. Although I will feel uncomfortable if you have another woman, I will definitely feel uncomfortable for the rest of my life if I leave you. Throwing herself into his arms, Ichi-nose Yuki opened her arms and hugged Kurosawa Hikari's back tightly. She raised her head and looked at him and said seriously. She also wants to go surfing with brother Guang, go shooting with brother Guang, eat together, and see more of him. On the field, brother Guang crushed the entire field with 2 arrows, shot with 1 arrow from a long distance, and pierced the Yangtze with 100 steps. He was unparalleled in the world and shocked the entire audience. When he was in the shoe store, he saw her wearing high heels and was amazed by her. Brother Guang was fascinated by her. The filming in the hotel was obviously about foot control, but in the end, she was secretive. She was embarrassed to speak out and only dared to peek at her brother Guang. On a date at the beach, he said deceptive words. It was in the name of helping her protect her from the sun, but in fact it was brother Guang who was evil at heart and wanted to take advantage. In karaoke, I was told that I couldn't sing at the entry level, but it turned out that Guang Ji had a moving voice and shined in the audience. And at the beginning, he planned to video chat with his online girlfriend, but when he saw her, he was shocked, confused, and at a loss. Thank you. Kurosawa Hikaru lowered his head and saw her eyes full of love. When he heard her decision, he suddenly felt tears filling his eyes and couldn't help but hug her. In fact, he had thought about how Ichi-nose Yuki and Ninomiya Chizuru would react after confessing this matter. He felt that Xiao Yuki was more likely to agree, because her dependence and love for him were so straightforward and sincere, without any concealment. However, that was only imagination after all, and when she really made this choice, it was still inevitable that people would be touched. Beside her, Ninomiya Chizuru saw them hugging each other, looking at each other affectionately and emotionally. Her body trembled constantly, clenched her fists, opened her mouth, wanted to speak, but her throat seemed to be blocked. Uncomfortable, sad, nauseated, angry, disappointed, mixed feelings. The multiple choice question was right in front of her. It was not a multiple choice question, but a single choice question with only 2 options. Although she was very good at studying and had done countless multiple choice questions, the multiple choice question in front of her was the most difficult one in her life. Because she didn't know which one to choose, as if anyone was wrong. Would it be better to leave Kurosawa? Absolutely not. She might regret it in the future, and she might never meet a man like Kurosawa again in the future. Every move, every word, every action can touch her heart, a man who can still make her heart beat at her age. Kurosawa, who carefully reached out his hand and tentatively held her hand when they rode the roller coaster together. Kurosawa, who could carry her around in the haunted house and make her feel safe. Kurosawa, who sat on the stage in the Western restaurant and sang to Alice for her. Kurosawa, who was surprised at the piano she gave him in the recording studio of the agency and then gave her the best performance. Kurosawa, who made lunch boxes for her, drew pictures for her, made up stories for her, and deliberately did bad things for her by the stream. And Kurosawa, who sang the romantic piano piece Adeline by the Water for her at the Tokyo Bunkakaikan. And Kurosawa, who refused a $1 billion contract and gave up everything for the piano she gave him. Maybe it was because they had few dates, but Kurosawa could make her fall in love with him, be fascinated by him, and be crazy about him no matter when. Would it be better if she didn't leave Kurosawa? The answer is undecided. Just seeing Kurosawa hugging another woman and looking at each other affectionately like this is unbearable for her. What if it was a kiss, and more intimate contact? She really couldn't stand it. Just imagining such a scene, her heart was broken. If she saw it with her own eyes, she felt that she would not be able to bear the blow. If he was hugging Runa, she might be able to barely accept it, but it was this annoying golden-haired girl who was intimate with Kurosawa. What's more, in addition to this golden-haired girl, there was also Shifunji Mirai. Turning a blind eye, she felt that she really couldn't accept all this honestly. To be honest, she would rather Kurosawa keep it a secret from her for the rest of her life, as long as she didn't let her know the existence of the other 2 people. Because if she didn't know, she wouldn't feel so uncomfortable. What should I do? Which one should I choose? Thoughts surged, and Ninomiya Chizuru's brain was about to be tangled. She really couldn't do this question. Confused, she looked at Igarashi Runa for help. Igarashi Runa, who had been standing in the distance, noticed her gaze, thought about it and came over. Don't think so much, just think of one thing, are you willing to give it up? Coming closer, Igarashi Runa leaned close to her ear and expressed his opinion. Once you miss such an excellent man like Kurosawa Hikaru, it is absolutely impossible to find another one in this life. Although he also deceived herself, from Chizuru's perspective, she felt that she could not let go anyway. Although he has the shortcoming of being fickle, his flaws do not outweigh his merits, and his advantages are countless. As soon as these words came out, Ninomiya Chizuru woke up from a dream and suddenly realized. In an instant, a picture emerged in her mind. It was the spring of last year, when the cherry blossoms were all over the sky, and Kurosawa Hikaru was assigned to the Ninomiya group. Teacher Ninomiya. That day, Kurosawa Hikaru walked into the student guidance room and met her alone. Please sit down, Kurosawa-san. At that time, she was holding the information and looking at it, and she also raised her head and said. At that moment, she looked up and saw Kurosawa Hikaru for the first time, and was touched and fascinated by him. The first time this boy saw her, he was touched by her appearance, and had yearning and admiration, but it was soon completely suppressed. Under his gentle and elegant temperament, his eyes were particularly cold, as if what he pursued was not in the present, but in the future. From that moment on, a seed was actually planted in her heart, and she had an impulse to melt him and understand him. From that day on, although she had many students to guide, she was the only one who paid the most attention to Kurosawa Hikaru and took special care of him. She said it was because he was the best student in the Ninomiya group, but in fact, only she knew his thoughts best. From the day Kurosawa entered school, she was looking forward to the day when Kurosawa Hikaru graduated. When he graduated, she could put aside the boundaries of status, be friends with him, fall in love with him, and get married. This expectation has been deeply rooted in countless days and nights and is difficult to erase. Recalling the mixed feelings in the eyes of Ninomiya Chizuru, she was determined. However, before she could speak, a voice like the sound of nature rang out. Excuse me, have you finished the discussion? Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 255. This was a sudden interruption, and it did not belong to the four people present, but to the fifth person. As soon as the sound came out, everyone followed the sound. Not far away, I saw a woman with black hair and red eyes walking towards her. Her stunning face was flawless and stunningly beautiful. The green hair is like a waterfall, like mist, light, soft and silky. The ruby-like red phoenix eyes reveal the coldness like frost. Lu Yu's thin eyebrows are curved, adding a touch of tenderness to her coldness. Her skin was a cold white, so white that it seemed to glow, and she was incredibly beautiful. The person who came was surprisingly the future of Sci-fi Jiyuan. And behind her, there was a maid, and it was the maid who was slapped twice. How did you come? Kurosawa Hikaru reacted first and couldn't help being startled. Sorry, Grandpa asked me to call you over. I sent you a message, but you didn't reply to me. The tall Sifenuenmarai tilted his head slightly as he gradually approached, and apologized with his hands clasped together. Seeing this scene, both Ichino's Yuki and Ninomiya Chizuru felt hostile and troublesome. This woman is so dangerous. Every movement she makes between raising her hands and feet, her voice between a frown and a smile, even the echoes and hooks between words, and a look in her eyes are all full of scheming. Next time. Kurosawa Hikaru was still facing a big problem in life at this time. How could he have time to chat with the real dragon of Shifunji Yuan? He immediately shook his head and said. He didn't dare to go away and leave Xiaoyuki and Miss Ninomiya alone. Women are prone to random thoughts, not to mention that this is a critical moment of decision-making. Although he couldn't force it, he had to do his best because he didn't want to lose Miss Ninomiya. If he leaves at this time, it might be the last straw for Miss Ninomiya to give up on him. But, okay, then I'll go back and talk to Grandpa. Hearing his rejection, Shifunjin Mirai subconsciously wanted to say something, but she glanced at Ichino's Yuki and Ninomiya Chizuru and gave up her thoughts. But what? Seeing how considerate she was, Kurosawa Hikaru knew that she had no right to speak in front of her grandfather, so he couldn't help but ask. Nothing's wrong. After hearing this question in the future, Saifunjai Yuan couldn't help but look at the two women and shook his head. Seeing her expression and words, Yuki Ichino's and Chizuru Ninomiya, who had finally calmed down, suddenly became furious. What is this woman doing, pretending to be considerate and sensible? When a woman says nothing is wrong, it usually means something is. Sorry, wait a minute. Kurosawa Hikaru, who knew this truth well, after apologizing to Xiaoyuki, released his embrace and walked over. What's the specific situation? When he got closer, Kurosawa Hikaru asked in a low voice. It's okay, I just feel that things are not going well on your side. Let me help you. Seeing him walking in front of him, Saifunjai Yuan Mirai also gently stood on tiptoes, came close to his ear, covered his mouth with his hand, and explained. Help me. Realizing the situation, Kurosawa Hikaru was a little surprised and shocked. She suddenly ran over. 3 women and 1 drama would only make the situation more complicated. She's coming. Saifunjai Yuan Mirai nodded slightly, squinted his eyes, peeked behind, and said. Hearing this, Kurosawa Hikaru stiffened and heard the sound of high heels approaching. Kurosawa Hikaru turned around and saw Ninomiya Chizuru walking up, and couldn't help but feel nervous. She was usually jealous easily, but this probably made her even more angry when she saw herself and Saifunjai Yuan quarreling with each other in the future. You go ahead, I'll wait for you to come back. However, Ninomiya Chizuru walked up to Kurosawa Hikaru step by step, stretched out her hands, helped Kurosawa tidy up, and then took out a handkerchief and helped him wipe up Yuki Ichino's. The place where I cried in his arms just now was wet. Her movements were very gentle, and her wiping movements were even more gentle and careful. There was a slight smile on her cold and beautiful face. This sudden concern caught Kurosawa Hikaru off guard. Really? Kurosawa Hikaru looked at the smile on her lips and felt fuzzy in his heart. He couldn't tell whether she was telling the truth or a lie. To be honest, among the 3 women, the only one he could read was Xiaoyuki. Because Xiaoyuki doesn't have a castle and is a bit clumsy. As for the future of Ninomiya Chizuru and Shifunjin, he cannot see through them. Both of these women were very smart and well read. Really, you go first. Ninomiya Chizuru's expression was very calm, with a slight smile. I'll go there later, there's no rush. Although she had a pretty smile, Kurosawa Hikaru could tell that she was fake smiling, and he was a little scared and quickly shook his head. This fake smile was so terrifying. He always felt that he would definitely lose Miss Ninomiya if he left. And the future has already said that the real dragon of Saifunjai Yuan came to him to say that this was a lie. He came here to help, I don't know what kind of help he was doing. Seeing that he was worried about his situation, Ninomiya Chizuru, who was holding onto his clothes, suddenly raised her head, stood on her tiptoes slightly, and pressed her lips directly on his lips. The 4 lips connected, lips touching, this was kiss, and it was also her answer. This sudden kiss, feeling the soft and intoxicating touch, Kurosawa Hikaru looked at the beautiful face in front of him and couldn't help but be stunned. What's going on? Is this her answer? Has she made a decision? Go, don't worry about me, but come back early, I have something to tell you. After a deep kiss, Ninomiya Chizuru stood firm again, and then said, "Okay." Kurosawa Hikaru looked at her expression, felt this thoughtfulness, a little flattered, and surprised. This kiss was enough to show her answer. "Brother Hikaru, I wanted to." Ichi-no's Yuki saw the scene and ran up unwillingly. Kurosawa Hikaru was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. He looked at Ninomiya Chizuru, then at Yuki, and finally at Shifunjayuan Mirai. Shifunjayuan Mirai tilted her head slightly, looked at him with smiling eyes, and didn't say anything. She was obviously smiling, but there was no smile in her eyes at all, extremely cold. "Brother Guang." At this moment, Ichi-no's Yuki was a little unwilling, stamping her feet and grumbling. "Okay." Kurosawa Hikari came back to his senses and saw that little Yuki was pouting and looked unhappy. For the sake of fairness, he could only agree. He. Seeing his nod, Ichi-no's Yuki smiled, and then stood on tiptoe. Facing the cold gaze of Shifunjayuan Mirai, Kurosawa Hikari could only lower his head to kiss her. Ah, wait. However, before the kiss, Ichi-no's Yuki suddenly reached out and pressed Kurosawa Hikari's mouth. This sudden stop made Kurosawa Hikari a little stunned. Immediately afterwards, Ichi-no's Yuki wiped his palms left and right to help him wipe his mouth. "It's okay." After doing this, Ichi-no's Yuki smiled, and then pouted her cherry mouth again. Seeing this action, Ninomiya Chizuru's light blue eyes suddenly darkened, bursting with murderous anger and coldness, clenching her fists, and smiling even more brilliantly. Gurgle. Although the way Yuki closed her eyes and asked for a kiss was super cute and heartwarming, Kurosawa Hikari felt that the murderous gazes turned from 1 to 2, and he felt his scalp tingling and creepy. What is this? It was completely unexpected. Die if you want to die. Because Yuki's kissing action had already been established, Kurosawa Hikari could only bite the bullet. Bending down, Kurosawa Hikari pressed his lips on Yuki's tender lips. As the kiss, Yuki Ichi-no's, who closed her eyes and waited for the kiss, trembled her eyelashes, and the corners of her eyes that were red and swollen from crying trembled, and she opened her eyes, which were a pair of happy and satisfied green eyes. Noticed her happiness, but Kurosawa Hikari was not happy, because there were two people watching next to her. It was so embarrassing that his toes were about to dig out a pyramid. It seems that it is not so easy to enjoy the blessing of having two wives. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't dare to kiss for too long, and the kiss ended quickly. "Kurosawa." At this moment, Shifunjayuan Mirai called out, "Miss, let me go." Hearing this call, Kurosawa Hikaru's body stiffened, turned around and looked at Shifunjayuan Mirai, giving her a helpless and pleading look. Although he was eager to kiss Mirai, 100 times, 1,000 times would not be too much. But in front of the other two people, this was too embarrassing. It was countless times more embarrassing than being watched by passers-by. Facing his helplessness, Shifunjayuan Mirai just smiled slightly and didn't say anything. "Are you jealous?" Kurosawa Hikaru saw her smile without any smile and realized her situation. Although Mirai said that as long as she could get her grandfather to agree and he could marry her, it didn't matter if he had 4 or 5 boats under his feet. But she also had a request, that is, she didn't want to see other people, and she absolutely didn't accept doing that kind of thing together. If she saw such a scene, it would be strange if she could not be jealous at all. Although it was so, Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help but look at Akai Sayaka on the side. Appropriate contact, kissing is not considered appropriate contact. Sensing his gaze, Akai Sayaka glanced at him, and then turned around and pretended not to see it. She had stopped it once just now. If she stopped it again, the eldest lady might really kill her. It seems that there is no way to escape. Seeing this scene, Kurosawa Hikaru realized that she chose to turn a blind eye, and she really didn't know whether she should be happy or have a headache. After hesitating, Kurosawa Hikaru could only bite the bullet and move forward. "Wipe your mouth first." As he came in front of her, although Shifunjayuan Mirai was angry just now, she also felt the maid turning around, and seeing Kurosawa Hikaru in front of her, her heartbeat accelerated a little. Hearing this, Kurosawa Hikaru could only wipe his mouth obediently. After all, for Shifunjayuan Mirai, this was still the first kiss, which was particularly important. When he finished wiping his mouth, Shifunjayuan Mirai nodded slightly with satisfaction, then raised her head slightly and pursed her lips. Seeing her delicate and sexy pink lips, Kurosawa Hikaru felt that the atmosphere this time was not right, but the situation had developed to this point, so he could only kiss her. This kiss was like eating a bite of ice cream, melting in the mouth, cool and soft. 4 more chapters are here, and today's extra chapters are for 1,800 monthly tickets, and extra chapters for average subscription. Current average number of subscriptions and updates, 21. Also asking for monthly votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Woojin. Chapter 256. The feeling of kissing is actually very subtle. It's like 2 clouds, or 2 marshmallows, fused together. The impression brought by touch is fleeting. The key is the feeling at that moment, the contact between 2 people. It's different from holding hands or hugging, but kissing. Really feeling the presence of the other person, the heartbeat at that moment will make people addicted to it and unable to extricate themselves. At this moment, Kurosawa Hikaru suddenly felt something. This discovery made Kurosawa Hikaru suddenly wake up and open his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, he met a pair of beautiful ruby eyes that revealed a smile that made people fall for him, and his heartbeat couldn't help but accelerate. Obviously, compared to Yuki-chan who can only kiss lips to lips in a daze, and Miss Ninomiya, Shifunjin Mirai is too good at playing. Shocked by this, Kurosawa Hikaru knew that if this was discovered, the problem would be serious, so he could only retract his words reluctantly. Seeing his unfinished reaction, Shifunjayuan Mirai's beautiful eyes seemed to have blue waves rippling, which made her feel very comfortable. She could feel that Kurosawa's infatuation with her was limited by the occasion and situation and had to stop. The kiss sounded long, but in fact it only lasted less than 10 seconds. Why is it so sweet? Did she eat some candy beforehand? Kurosawa retracted his mouth and couldn't help but glance at her lips again, feeling a little surprised. It has to be said that Shifunjayuan is truly a beauty in the world in the future. Every move of his hands and feet exudes a breathtaking charm, which is enough to make any man fascinated and fall for her. Cough. Although he had endless aftertaste, he knew what the occasion was. He coughed lightly and turned around to face the other 2 people. But when Kurosawa Hikaru turned around, what he saw in front of him stunned him. Xiaoyuki on the side turned sideways at some point and covered his eyes with his hands, as if pretending not to see. But Miss Ninomiya, who was more prone to jealousy, did not do this, but looked directly at herself. However, behind her rimless glasses, those intellectual and beautiful, cold blue eyes like jade were stained with a layer of mist, and tears rolled down from the corners of her eyes like broken pearls. Crack. She bit her lips tightly, tears streaked down her beautiful cheeks, and fell rapidly and continuously on her chest like stalactites on her chin. The tears were like a glass heart, hitting the ground and turning into crystal water splashes all over the sky. Her body was shaking, and she was holding her left arm with one hand, clenching her fist tightly, and her body was tensing up. The right hand grasped the arm tightly, struggling to grasp it, and the nails even pierced into the skin, and bright red blood slid down the slender and white fingers and arms. She cried again, her sad and aggrieved expression was heartbreaking. Ninomiya-chan. Kurosawa Hikaru saw her crying again and saw her scratching herself. His mind buzzed and he couldn't help but take steps to get closer to her. But just when he took a step, Ninomiya Chizuru shook her head and subconsciously took a step back. Her half-step back made Kurosawa froze in place. Poof. Seeing this scene, Kurosawa Hikaru, who was already prepared to face the judgment and scolding, vaguely heard something breaking, which was the sound of his heart being torn apart. Immediately afterwards, an unprecedented sense of fear emerged from his heart. Fear, guilt, panic, many emotions are intertwined in my heart. Sorry. Ninomiya Chizuru bit her lip tightly, so hard that she even bit her lip. Seeing Kurosawa Hikaru's expression of despair and astonishment, she said harshly. Her apology had a nasal sound, it was the sound of crying, a sound on the verge of breaking. It was different from the fight with Ichino's Yuki just now, but he lost the fight and cried heartbreakingly, earth-shatteringly. Her tears this time were quiet and silent, sad and wronged. The person who should say sorry is. Kurosawa Hikaru heard the aggrieved and low cry and her apology, and his fear forced him to take a step forward again. However, in response to him, Ninomiya Chizuru shook her head and took half a step back. The two retreats shattered the hopes in Kurosawa Hikaru's heart, causing his words to stop abruptly and his movements to freeze in place, looking at Ninomiya Chizuru, who always maintained a distance of 2 meters. She was standing there, less than 2 meters away, but there seemed to be an insurmountable ravine between the two of them. In fact, most women are duplicitous animals, unlike men who speak their minds. Rather than words, a girl's physical reactions and actions truly represent her thoughts. At this moment, Ninomiya Chizuru's resistance to retreat while keeping her distance undoubtedly showed everything. I thought I could accept it. I just thought I could accept the real you, so I kissed you, but when I saw you kissing them, I realized that I really couldn't do it. Ninomiya Chizuru shook her head, feeling extremely heartbroken. Do it all at once, second time tired, third time exhausted. For Kurosawa, she worked hard to convince herself, cheered up twice, and rekindled hope twice. She kept comforting herself and convincing herself with various reasons. If she misses Kurosawa, she may never meet a man who makes her heart beat like Kurosawa in her life. Kurosawa was really kind to her. He made plans for their date, got up early in the morning to make lunch, and knew that she didn't want to be seen. He even drove her to sketch in the Asira Valley several hundred kilometers away. As Runa said, aside from everything else, she really couldn't let go of Kurosawa. However, no matter how much she mentally built up her heart and built up iron walls for her heart, when she watched Kurosawa kiss other women, not just once but twice, she really collapsed. She is not a generous woman. Even if she sees Kurosawa sitting and chatting with other girls, drinking coffee across the table, talking and laughing, she is already extremely jealous. How can she accept it like this? Ninomiya Chizuru wiped the corners of her eyes with her bloody right hand so that her vision would no longer be blurry. She looked deeply at Kurosawa Hikaru's face, and saw Shifunjin Mirai behind him. She turned her head and saw Ichino's Yuki, who turned around when she heard the noise. Sorry. Seeing the existence of the three of them, Ninomiya Chizuru became more and more frightened and painful. She looked at Kurosawa Hikaru again, apologized to him with a deep bow, turned around and ran away. But she just ran a few steps, because she was running too fast, her feet stumbled, her body stumbled, and she almost fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, Kurosawa Hikaru's pupils shrank and his body moved subconsciously, wanting to go over and help her. But this time, Ninomiya Chizuru did not fall, but stabilized her body. She didn't turn around or look back, but continued running. Even though her ankle was sprained and her arm was pricked by nails, it did not affect her escape, because it was far less than her heartbreaking heartache. At this moment, she just wanted to run away as far as possible, to a place where she couldn't see them. Well, Igarashi Runa, who had been watched Chizuru's figure gradually running away with great distress, turned his head to look at Kurosawa Hikaru, sighed deeply, and immediately followed. The martial arts hall is very large, and all roads are smooth. Even though there are many detours, there are few dead ends. Ninomiya Chizuru and Igarashi Runa disappeared around the corner. Seeing their figures disappear around the corner, Kurosawa Hikaru froze on the spot, reaching out his hand to retain them, but couldn't say a word. Because of Miss Ninomiya's sorry words just now and her silent tears, they were like mountains weighing on his heart, making him breathless and suffocating his courage to get closer. Not only did he lose his movements, Yuki Ichino's looked left and right, feeling a little at a loss. "Brother Guang, won't you catch up?" After Yuki Ichino's hesitated, he couldn't help but ask. If Miss Ninomiya's hysterical crying, like a dam bursting, only made her feel depressed and aggrieved, and she couldn't help but cry with her, then this time, she felt the pain of Miss Ninomiya very clearly. Collapse. Those expressions and words were heart-wrenching and sad. Even as a love rival, she felt heartbroken. Kurosawa Hikaru stood there in disbelief, looking at the corner in the distance. Even though he was wearing the long-sleeved hakama, which was very dense and hot in summer, his hands, feet, and heart were extremely cold. Before today, he had trouble sleeping and eating many nights and was restless. He went to the archery dojo every day and relied on Brother Shinichi's scumbag quotes to comfort himself. He must accept everything calmly. Life. He thought he was mentally prepared for them to turn around and leave. However, when the separation actually happened in front of him, he found that the preparations he made were of no use at all. Until she left, Ms. Ninomiya retained her dignity. She did not cry heartbreakingly, nor burst out in anger, but just like this, Kurosawa Hikaru's guilt was endless. "I am the one who should say I'm sorry." Kurosawa Hikaru lowered his head and looked at his hands, his whole body was numb. In the archery field, he was a master of archery, with both arms firing the bow, and his strength was so great, but now he was so powerless, he didn't even have the courage to take steps to chase. Because he realized that what he did had completely hurt Miss Ninomiya. Those two kisses just now were like the straw that broke the camel's back, crushing Miss Ninomiya's heart. He just kissed Ichino's Yuki, and Miss Ninomiya couldn't hold herself any longer. When he turned around to kiss Shifunjin Mirai, he couldn't see the expression on Miss Ninomiya's face, and he would never have the chance to see it again in this life. Because this is reality, there is no video playback function, and there is no option to go back. He only knew that when he turned around, Miss Ninomiya was already crying. She had reached the limit of her patience and finally collapsed. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 257. Kurosawa Hikaru was stunned, his thoughts in a mess. Scenes appeared in front of his eyes. In the student guidance room, Miss Ninomiya said that in order to avoid her being influenced by other girls and delaying her studies, she proudly agreed to go on a date with him. At Shinjuku Station, Miss Ninomiya wore a pair of frameless glasses and made a dazzling appearance, which made his heart beat fast. When riding the roller coaster in the amusement park, he took the opportunity to hold Miss Ninomiya's hand. There are many more. Every scene of her makes Kurosawa Hikaru fascinated and infatuated, heart-beating, sweet to the point of laughing when sleeping. But at this moment, everything was broken. Thinking carefully, such memories and scenes are probably the power that supported Miss Ninomiya until just now. However, no matter how precious and sweet their memories are, his actions still deeply hurt Miss Ninomiya. Even if she caught Xiaoyuki hugging him, Miss Ninomiya still remained rational, did not make a big fuss, and retained her dignity. Even when she walked into the dark, she still kept calm and tried her best to figure out the situation. Although she looked strong on the surface, her heart was probably already broken by herself. He completely ignored what kind of psychological preparation and construction Miss Ninomiya had done to muster up the courage to come up and kiss him. It was ridiculous that he had the thought of let's die just now, even if it was unfair, he really shouldn't have kissed everyone just now for the sake of fairness. If he could do it again, he would have to evade the matter even if he tried to find a way, and then compensate Xiaoyuki and Mirai privately afterwards. Because it was too cruel to let them watch him have intimate contact with other women. Thinking of the details just now, Kurosawa Hikaru was stunned in place for a long time without reaction. I'm sorry, it seems that I have made things worse. At this moment, an apologetic and subtle voice rang out. The word I'm sorry made Kurosawa Hikaru react. He looked sideways and saw that Shifunjayuan Mirai had walked to his side at some point and held his arm. Unlike her previous calm and confident look, her little face was full of guilt and sadness. It's not your fault, it's only my fault. Kurosawa Hikaru came back to his senses, realized what she said, and shook his head. How could she be blamed for this? It was only his fault that he didn't seize the last chance. Although he said so, Shifunjayuan Mirai was still worried about it. She could see that Kurosawa really liked that Miss Ninomiya, and that Miss Ninomiya's love for Kurosawa was already extremely passionate. This Miss Ninomiya was not only cold and mature on the surface, even if she completely collapsed, she kept her dignity until the end, crying but not making a fuss. It's hard to imagine what kind of psychological process she went through to show the expression just now. Brother Guang, I'm sorry, if I didn't let you kiss me just now, it would be fine. Ichino's Yuki also came up and held his arm, feeling extremely guilty. She shouldn't have been so competitive just now. If she didn't get up, it might not have been like this. As the saying goes, there is no acquaintance without fighting. After the dispute just now, she has actually noticed that Miss Ninomiya only looks strong on the surface, but in fact, she is extremely fragile in her heart. Don't say that. It's not your fault. It's only my fault. Seeing her pitiful and frightened look, Kurosawa Hikaru shook his head, forced himself to cheer up, and smiled. Ichino's Yuki was very distressed when she saw his bitter smile that made people feel distressed. Sad emotions are contagious, making the atmosphere extremely solemn. It's okay, it's okay. Realizing that the two girls were upset because of him, Kurosawa Hikaru took a few deep breaths and forced himself to say. Only after losing something can you know how to cherish it. He realized how cruel it was to let girls accept that he was a playboy. Facing Ichino's Yuki and Shifunjayuan Mirai, he was also grateful and guilty. Grateful that they wanted to be with him. Guilty that the harm caused to them by today's events must be compensated more and more in the future. How can it be okay? Shifunjayuan Mirai was a little anxious. Although she had not experienced it herself and could not feel his pain, Kurosawa's sad and lost expression just now, anyone with a discerning eye could see how painful it was for him to have Chizuru Ninomiya leave. Brother Guang, why don't you chase her? Miss Ninomiya should not have run far now. If you let her go this time, she might really leave. Ichino's Yuki also felt that this matter was very important. She grabbed his arm and shook it, begging. I said I would respect her choice. Seeing that they all wanted him to chase her, Kurosawa Guang pulled his hand out of their hands and reached out to touch the heads of the two. As long as he remained the same, not loving only one person, not a devoted man, he had no right to keep her. He had already realized very deeply that he had really done something wrong this time and had hurt her thoroughly. If he went back on his word and pestered her, it would delay Miss Ninomiya's life. Okay. When Shifunjayuan saw that he meant what he said in the future, she raised her head and understood. As a bystander, she naturally felt that it would be better to try to save him, but for the person involved, it was not that easy. Kurosawa Hikaru realized that she had given up and no longer forced himself to chase, and looked at her gratefully. He really didn't have the courage to pursue it, because he had already tried it just now. It's not that he didn't think about staying. At that moment, he was more anxious than anyone else. He wanted to do something to seek forgiveness and amends. But Miss Ninomiya was completely hurt by him, and now no matter what he does, he just makes up for it, to no avail. But as a girl, Ichi-nose Yuki felt that this matter could not end like this. I'm fine. Seeing that she was still anxious, Kurosawa turned around and touched her head. All right. Ichi-nose Yuki looked up at him, then at the corner where Ninomiya Chizuru disappeared, and finally met the eyes of Mirai Shihoan on the side before nodding. So good. Seeing her approval, Kurosawa rubbed her head and smiled. Let's go get something to eat, Sifan suggested in the future. Sorry, I have no appetite right now. Can you please leave me alone for a while? Kurosawa Hikaru heard the suggestion and smiled bitterly. Although he was indeed a little hungry, he was really not in the mood. Okay, but I hope you won't have this expression next time I see you. Seeing that he finally made this request, Sifan looked at him deeply in the future and said, I try my best. Kurosawa Hikaru choked up when he heard this. He didn't have a mirror and didn't know what his expression was. May I have your name? After receiving his answer, Shifunjayuan Mirai suddenly looked at Xiao Yuki on the side. My name is Yuki Ichi-nose. Faced with this question, Xiao Yuki was stunned for a moment and then responded. Ichi-nose Yuki, let's go. Shifunjayuan Mirai thought about the name for a while, remembered it, waved, turned around and left Kurosawa Hikaru's side. Ah! Upon hearing this request, Ichi-nose Yuki was immediately stunned. Walk. Where is this going? Brother Guang is so sad, it's exactly the time when he needs comfort. Leave him alone for a while. Seeing that she still wanted to stay, Sifan explained in the future. There are two types of human sadness, one that can be described and one that cannot be described. When girls face troubles, if they have a best friend, they can usually talk about it. But men are different, because every man is very strong, so he rarely pours out his bitterness to others. In her opinion, Kurosawa's current troubles cannot be described, even to anyone. This matter is too complicated. It is not a worry at work, but a worry as simple as study. Oh. Yuki Ichi-nose was stunned for a moment, looked up, saw Hikaru's eyes, nodded, and acted obediently. Oh, hearing this response, Sifan couldn't help but look at her one more time in the future and read it over in his mind. Although she didn't have much contact with him, she always felt that Yuki Ichi-nose seemed clumsy. Immediately, they walked away, taking the maid with them. Until they also left this place, Kurosawa Hikaru looked at the empty eyes, then looked at the corner in the distance, then walked to the wall and sat down. He didn't say anything, just sat quietly, letting his long Kyoto hakama drag the floor. Unlike Ninomiya Chizuru and Igarashi Runa who really left, at the other corner, a head came out. Strands of flowing wavy blonde hair were hanging down, and Ichi-nose Yuki's green eyes looked at Kurosawa Hikaru. However, before she could take a second look, she was forcefully pulled back. What are you doing? I want to see if Brother Guang will cry. Being forcibly pulled back by the shoulders, Ichi-nose Yuki was speechless and angry. Leave him alone for a while, do you really want him to cry? Sifan Mirai stood aside, holding her shoulder with one hand and asking. Yes. Realizing that she was not arguing with him, but instead asking questions, Yuki Ichi-nose was stunned for a moment, unable to argue anymore, and nodded immediately. Why? After receiving this answer, Sifan Mirai immediately couldn't understand her. Because Brother Guang is crying, which means he is venting. If he never vents and keeps the negative emotions in his heart, he will not be able to get out of this incident. Seeing that she didn't understand and didn't care, Ichi-nose Yuki explained to her. When she was in junior high school, she hid in her room and cried for a long time, and she had many heart-to-heart talks with her parents before she was able to come out. For Guangji, the pain of Miss Ninomia's departure is definitely much greater than the bullying she suffered in the first place. Indeed. After hearing this statement, Sifenjia Yuan Marai nodded thoughtfully. Judging from the psychology she had read, people's emotions must be vented. If you keep suppressing it and don't let it out, it's likely to become a mental illness. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 258. Sitting alone against the wall, Kurosawa Hikaru lowered his head and said nothing. He knew he had to cheer up, because Ninomiya Chizuru was gone, and there were two girls around him to protect and accompany, and he couldn't bring this negative emotion to them. But the pain brought to him this time was countless times greater than when he was sold to Xiaoyuki by Ikaritsu Muji Kairi a month ago. When he was sold, although he was shocked and felt unbelievable, thinking how could such a thing happen, he felt more speechless than sad, because he was sold too cheaply. Because he knew his own value very well, even if he didn't have a system at the time, he knew how good he was, and it was definitely the other party's loss to sell him so cheaply. But this time was different, he felt that his loss of Miss Ninomiya was his loss. Because Ninomiya Chizuru was very good, she was very intellectual, very smart, very beautiful, very arrogant, and she was charming in every move. She was still a very innocent girl. Just holding his hand would make her heart beat with caution, and kissing him would make her blush. But such an excellent woman, a woman who deserved his lifelong care and love, was lost by him. How much sorrow can you have? Just like a river of spring water flowing eastward. Dong. At this moment, a heavy voice suddenly sounded. Kurosawa Hikaru looked up and saw a huge box in front of him. He looked up and saw Akai Sayaka, who was wearing a long skirt, with short hair, delicate features, but a cold expression, and two slap marks. Lunch. As their eyes met, Akai Sayaka said coldly, turned around and walked away. Her eyes were calm and she would not have bothered to approach Kurosawa Hikaru if she hadn't been ordered. Do you want freedom? Seeing her turn around, Kurosawa Hikaru didn't look at the lunch box, but suddenly said. As soon as these words came out, Akai Sayaka's body paused uncontrollably, and then she started walking again. However, her steps were very slow, and she was no longer in a hurry to leave. Ms. Sayaka, help me be with the future. After marriage, you and I will not interfere with each other. You can do whatever you want. Although he couldn't see her expression, Kurosawa Mitsuru tilted his head and saw her hesitation and pause at that moment, and raised his voice. Freedom is very important to everyone. Freedom means not being restricted. Food, clothing, life, wealth, body, marriage, love. As long as people lack something, they will pursue it. For Akai Sayaka, although she is a maid with rich living conditions, if you ask her what she lacks the most and what she wants the most, it is definitely freedom. What do you want to do? Akai Sayaka heard his voice, turned around, and quickly walked in front of him, looking down at him on the ground from a high position. If you really have this intention, but you say it so loudly, are you afraid that the wall has no ears? I want to be alone with Mirai for more than half an hour. Facing her disgusted and annoyed look, Kurosawa Hikaru just made his own request. Impossible. Sayaka Akai decisively refused this request. What a joke, letting the young lady be alone with him for half an hour, for such a long time, God knows what will happen. Even if he is likely to become the young lady's husband, he must not sleep with her before marriage. I can guarantee that I have appropriate contact with her, at most like what happened just now. Kurosawa Hikaru seemed to see through her concerns and said lightly. Do you think I will believe it? Sayaka Akai didn't believe his nonsense. There are several kinds of nonsense that men can't believe, including this one, I will never do anything. A single man and a single woman, both in love, these two elements together, It's just a thunderbolt, she doesn't need to think about what will happen. Do you think I'm a person without credibility? Kurosawa Hikaru looked up at her with a cold expression. There was no way to get out of this matter, so he could only think of ways to divert his attention. I can't do it. Sayaka Akai met his cold and hot eyes, unable to guess the man's thoughts and ideas, and said after a pause. What's the problem? It's not that he didn't agree, but that he couldn't do it. Kurosawa Hikaru realized that she was moved and said immediately. Except for the young lady's bedroom, toilet, and bathroom, there are surveillance cameras in every room of that apartment. In addition to going to the toilet, even if it's taking a bath, I have to follow and help the young lady take a bath. Sayaka Akai still stood straight, her voice was light and fast, briefly explaining the most critical problem. There is no surveillance in the Chasing Wind dojo. Kurosawa Hikaru had thought about this problem a long time ago. The future proposal to chase her and make her his own was unrealistic. He could feel that Sayaka Akai's situation was more about freedom than love. The young lady will be yours sooner or later, so why rush it? The solution was in front of her, but Sayaka Akai still had concerns and looked at him coldly. Let them be alone for half an hour. If this matter was discovered, she would definitely be punished more severely than death. You know, the maids and housekeepers of the Akai family have not violated the house rules for many years. After so many years, a violator suddenly appeared. He would definitely be used as an example to warn others. Because she longs for freedom, and I need your handle to ensure that you can become one of us. Kurosawa Hikaru looked at her and treated her frankly. You. Hearing this, Akai Sayaka glared at him angrily, and was very angry. This guy also knew that if this thing was done, it would become her handle. Be a maid for life, or take a gamble, which one do you choose? Facing her disgusted and resistant eyes, Kurosawa Hikaru didn't mind and gave her a choice and opportunity. It's better to live or to live a life worse than death. Akai Sayaka refuted his statement. Once this thing was done and exposed, Kurosawa Hikaru and the eldest lady might be fine, but she would definitely be dead. You are not living, you have no freedom, and you have to serve others for your whole life, be beaten and scolded, and work hard without complaint. It's no different from living a life worse than death. Kurosawa Hikaru also refuted her statement. But you have the handle in your hand, I can't escape forever, you can even use it to threaten me and give me orders. Akai Sayaka was unmoved and said coldly. There is such a thing, you specifically reminded me of this matter, do you want me to give you orders? Kurosawa Hikaru was a little surprised when he heard this, and then looked her up and down. Could it be that this maid is a masochist? She doesn't like to be treated gently, but likes to be bullied. How is it possible? Sensing his gaze, Akai Sayaka glared at him fiercely and said coldly. Anyway, do you agree or not? I can guarantee with my personality that I will kiss her at most. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't want to tease her, and promised again. Hearing this, Akai Sayaka looked at him deeply and fell into contemplation and hesitation. You can think about it slowly and tell me next time. Seeing that she was thinking, Kurosawa Hikaru was not in a hurry and gave her enough time to think. Because he knew very well that the rules and methods of the Akai family were very scary and very strict. Are you forcing me? Akai Sayaka, who was thinking, heard this, and her eyes were cold, and she looked at him with more disgust. I'll give you time, why do I force you? Kurosawa Hikaru felt confused, what was going on? You know that I will definitely be punished after I go back today, and you want me to make up my mind. Seeing that he was still pretending, Akai Sayaka sneered. Isn't it enough that you were slapped twice? You will be punished again when you go back. After saying this, Kurosawa Hikaru saw her eyes that thought she saw through everything, and her sarcastic sneer, and she was not angry, but a little stunned. You don't know. Because his expression was very natural, The coldness and vigilance in Akai Sayaka's eyes were restrained a little, and she became suspicious. Mirai didn't tell me about this. She only said that you were beaten because you were protecting me and her meeting in the dojo. Kurosawa Hikari heard this and felt a little chilled, and said immediately. He felt that it was a serious and humiliating thing for a beautiful woman like Miss Sayaka to be slapped twice in public. But this was still a light punishment, and there would be punishment after returning. If he could be slapped twice in public, he could do anything terrible in private. Akai Sayaka looked down at him, unable to tell whether he was sincere or not. I'll tell Mr. Zhenlong not to punish you. After thinking about it, Kurosawa Mitsuru felt that it was not okay and stood up immediately. Although he didn't like to meddle in other people's business, the maid was punished for his and the future, so he had to take care of this matter. No need, if you plead for me, he will only agree on the surface. When we go back, they will think that I have a good relationship with you and the punishment will be more severe. Seeing him stand up, Akai Sayaka spoke. Why are the Shifunjayuan family and the Akai family so troublesome? Kurosawa Mitsuru, who was about to leave, was dissuaded and was extremely disgusted. The two families were tied together, and although they helped each other grow together, it was really troublesome. Smiles can be fake, lies can be true, but hate and disgust are not so easy to pretend. Next time the young lady goes to the Chasing Wind dojo, I will give you 31 minutes, although your personality is guaranteed to be worthless. Akai Sayaka felt his strong resentment towards the Shifunjayuan family and the Akai family, and finally gave in. In fact, she could guess that Kurosawa Hikaru's plot was not just this time, the key was for privacy and freedom of life after marriage. If it is really after marriage, if they do not interfere with each other, it will be good for both parties. That's it. Finally, when she made a decision, Kurosawa Hikaru looked at her, nodded immediately, and smiled at him. Although she has not completely dealt with this maid, she is willing to compromise once, and it will be easier in the future. However, Akai Sayaka was unmoved by his smile, and was still as cold as ice. Just looking at his eyes, the disgust were slightly reduced. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 259. Has anyone ever told you that you look good when you glare at people? Looking at her with disgust, Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help but said. To be honest, being stared at by her who dislikes you and looks helpless makes you feel inexplicably refreshed. In the final analysis, it is because she has very good looks and is a rare beauty. She may not be able to compare with Mirai Shifunjin, but the genes of the Akai family are not bad either. Are you a pervert? Sayaka Akai was speechless after hearing this. It felt good to stare at him, right? Kurosawa Hikaru paused, stunned by her merciless comment. Thinking about it carefully, this kind of mentality is indeed quite perverted. But there was nothing he could do. He had watched an instant noodle show in his previous life called A Disgusting Look Will Make You Watch Fat Times. Maybe because he was brainwashed by that show, he looked at you with a look of disgust, but looked at you with a helpless expression, which he found quite touching. How long have I been in a daze just now? Putting this matter aside, Kurosawa Hikaru thought about it and asked. About an hour. Sayaka Akai felt a little uncomfortable. When he said that, she didn't know whether to glare at him. Have they eaten? Kurosawa Hikaru didn't expect that so much time had passed. His heart froze and he asked immediately. Not yet. Sayaka Akai shook her head, and then looked around the corner in the distance, where Yuki Ichinos was peeking out to look at this side. As their eyes met, the head immediately retracted. Call them to come and eat together. Kurosawa Hikaru also noticed this, it was a little funny, and he said immediately. I have to say that maybe because Xiaoyuki is still young and not deeply involved in the world, sometimes some of her little moves are weird and cute. Hearing this request, Sayaka Akai nodded slightly, and then walked over leisurely. First settle the archery competition, then go on a date with them. As she left, Kurosawa Hikaru, who was temporarily alone, also muttered to himself. Looking at the present and looking forward to the future, it is not possible to dwell on the past and sorrow as we did just now. He wanted to use the busyness of reality to suppress that matter. Not long after, as Akai Sayaka disappeared around the corner, Ichino's Yuki jumped out, and then ran over happily. Brother Guang. Wearing a white dress, she ran over with a smile on her face. She is still the same as before. Although she is very beautiful, her character is full of vitality and vitality. She will immediately run up to you when you say hello, which is very cute. Immediately behind was Shifunjin Mirai. Different from Xiaoyuki's eagerness and cheerfulness, she walked very elegantly and walked over with a smile on her face, very quiet and dignified. Brother Guang, what were you talking about with the maid sister just now? They talk so much. The journey was not long. Yuki Ichino's ran to Kurosawa Hikaru and sat down on the ground next to him, curiously. She had been peeking just now, so she noticed Brother Guang talking to the maid sister. Well, it sounds a bit complicated. I talked about something with her. Faced with this question, Kurosawa Hikaru glanced at her smiling face, pondered and then said. Can't you tell me? Ichino's Yuki was very curious and said coquettishly. It's about her, do you want to know? Kurosawa Hikaru glanced at Shifunjin Mirai who was walking over and whispered. Forget it. Yuki Ichino's noticed this movement and immediately shook his head and covered his ears with his hands. Although she didn't mind that Brother Guang had other women, she still didn't want to hear about other women if possible. For example, in the 3 kisses just now, Miss Ninomiya attacked her secretly and she didn't have time to react. Later, when Brother Guang wanted to kiss Shifunjin Mirai, she chose to look at no evil and didn't want to see that. Are you hungry? When Shifunjin Mirai came up, she naturally noticed their little movements, but she glanced at Ichino's Yuki who was covering her ears with her hands, but she didn't ask any more questions. You're hungry. Aren't you hungry? Why don't you eat first? Seeing her maturity and stability, Kurosawa Hikaru smiled and said in confusion. When the game ended, it was already 12 o'clock. Since what happened just now took so long, it was probably past 2 o'clock by now, long past dinner time. Because I want to eat with you, but I haven't eaten with you yet. Shifunjin Mirai saw that his smile was no longer so bitter, and he was a little happy, so he smiled lightly. Have you not had dinner together yet? I feel like you have known each other for a long time. Ichino's Yuki was a little surprised. Because their way of getting along was smooth, natural, and extremely familiar, she felt that these two people must have known each other for a long time. Her family environment is relatively complicated and she is very strictly controlled. Kurosawa Hikaru nodded slightly and explained. Such simple things can still be talked about so that they can have a little understanding of each other. How strict? Usually I don't even have 10 minutes of free time. Wow. Today is a day off for me. Shifunjin saw her smart and shocked expression in the future and was not surprised. This golden-haired little girl obviously looks very beautiful and is not young, but her personality is quite childish and she has no fuss. In short, he is the type who easily shows his worries on his face. It's quite comfortable to get along with such people, no need to be suspicious. Miss, please sit down. At the same time, Akai Sayaka untied the large bento that was wrapped around her in the empty seat next to her, and spread the surface cloth on the ground as a picnic blanket. Then, she also began to split the bento, spreading it layer by layer, and distributed tableware to everyone. How much does this meal cost? Ichino's Yuki just took a look, her eyes were dazzled, and her body was numb. Because she saw huge lobster tails, caviar, eel, marbled wagyu steaks, and some good-looking, very expensive at first glance, all of which were delicacies she had only seen on TV. Well, I don't know either. Hearing this question, Shifunjayuan Marai, who was walking over to sit down, looked at the food in front of her and looked at the maid. She is not a young lady who doesn't care about the world. On the contrary, she basically reads the news that everyone can see, and she also knows the secrets that everyone doesn't know. However, she knew the prices of cruise ships, villas, yachts, and airplanes, and also knew the value of clothes, bags, and various luxury goods. She had no idea about the price of food, because it was all taken care of by the maid. I don't know either, I just called someone to send it over. Sensing the eldest lady's doubts, Akai Sayaka shook her head slightly. She had no idea what the prices of these dishes were outside. She just called the 5-star hotel under the Maple Group and made a takeaway meal for the eldest lady. Are you hungry? Kurosawa Hikaru was a little surprised, but he didn't care too much. He looked at Xiaoyuki, who was clinging to him. Obviously, this girl has started again, to be resistant to expensive things. To be more precise, she doesn't like expensive things, but she feels bad about it. This is the case with shoes and clothes, and the same is true for food. Hungry, but Ichinosuke was hungry a long time ago, and she was even more greedy when she saw such a luxurious lunch, but she was hesitant. How long does she have to work part-time to earn this meal? Come and eat together. Seeing that she was hesitant, Shifunjayuan Marai also invited her. Is it okay? Hearing this invitation, Ichinosuke looked at her, still a little embarrassed. Sure, and Kurosawa, you come and sit too. Shifunjayuan Marai nodded slightly, and did not force her, but looked at Kurosawa Mitsuru. For such a big meal, Kurosawa Mitsuru was not polite at all. He stood up and pulled up Yuki, and took her to the tablecloth and sat down. Seeing that they were sitting a little close, Shifunjayuan Marai did not say anything, but just stood up silently and sat down on the other side of him. Although it is kept warm, it has been a bit long. Please enjoy it as soon as possible, otherwise the flavor will change. Akai Sayaka, who was standing by, saw the scene of being hugged by both sides, and did not express any opinions, but just reminded. Maid sister, don't you want to sit down and eat? Hearing this reminder, Ichinosuke saw that she was still standing upright by the side, and was a little puzzled. I am a maid, I am not qualified to sit at the same table with the master and his guests. Akai Sayaka also responded to this question. Ichinosuke looked at Guangji, then looked at Shifunjayuan Marai, wanting to speak, but not daring. After all, she was someone else's maid. You should eat something too, even if you can't sit together to eat, you can eat next to her. Kurosawa Hikari looked at it, picked up a box of bento and handed it to her. Eating next to her is not allowed, it's against the rules. Faced with this action, Akai Sayaka did not move, just said woodenly. Then go to the corner to eat. Please eat. No one is watching here, and there is no surveillance. You should eat quickly. If some criminals appear later, what if you don't have the strength to protect Marai? Kurosawa Hikari simply said. And you can protect the young lady. Don't spoil the fun, sit down and eat quickly. Seeing her repeated and repeated rejections, Shifunjayuan Marai finally couldn't hold back and spoke. Yes. After receiving the order from the eldest lady, Sayaka Akai no longer refused. I'm starting. When she sat down, Shifunjayuan Marai saw that no one was moving, and immediately started the pre-meal ceremony. I'm starting. Seeing this scene, Kurosawa Hikari and Ichinosuke also followed suit. Neon pays attention to this kind of small etiquette. Although it is tedious and tiring, it has a strong sense of ritual. Only Sayaka did not follow suit. After discovering this, the three people looked at her. I'm starting. Sayaka was stared at by them, and although she was not used to it, she followed suit. After finishing this, they officially started eating. Eat. Kurosawa Hikari directly picked up a piece of peeled and grilled lobster tail and put it in Yuki's bowl. Thank you. Seeing him pick up the food for her, Yuki Ichino's thanked him a little happily. At the same time, Kurosawa Hikari was about to start eating when he felt a strong gaze from the side. Turning his head, he saw Shifunjayuan Mirai staring at him, with an empty bowl. Being stared at by her ruby-like eyes, Kurosawa Hikaru responded, smiled, and also helped her pick up a grilled lobster tail. Although the lobster tail was in the bowl, Shifunjayuan Mirai just looked down and stared at him again. Eat it? Kurosawa Hikaru was stunned for a moment, and then thought of something and added. Okay, you should eat it quickly too. Hearing this, Shifunjayuan Mirai smiled slightly and nodded. 4 more chapters are here. The current average subscription and additional chapters, 23. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 261. I'm very sorry, chapters 252-255 have been rewritten. Please go back and take a look. If the content shows that Chizuru Ninomiya is gone, it is a modified version. If not, it means that the cache of the app is stuck. Press and hold the chapter in the directory to download again. After she was full, Sayaka packed up her lunchbox. Brother Guang, do you have a game this afternoon? Ichino's Yuki looked at it and wanted to help, but he didn't dare to move. After thinking about it, he asked. No, my next game is the day after tomorrow. Kurosawa shook his head and explained. In the archery competition, the team competition is the highlight because it is a duel between various schools. The individual competition can be finished in half a day, while the team competition will not be held until tomorrow night. On the third day of the competition, top-ranked schools from all regions across the country will gather at the martial arts hall to compete, and the winner will be decided within 1 day. Then can I see you shooting arrows the day after tomorrow? After receiving this answer, Yuki Ichino's looked forward to it and his eyes shone. Putting aside the troubles for the moment, Brother Guang is really handsome when he is shooting arrows. Especially when viewed from the side, the archery posture was so handsome that it made her feel suffocated. Of course, Kurosawa nodded slightly. Since they have all participated, it is natural to compete until the end. Maybe he has won the long shot championship in the individual competition in the Kanto region, but before he can achieve the fame required to open a dojo, he still needs more public performances. It's 2:54 in the afternoon. The game will be in a while. Do you want to watch it? Ichino's Yuki took out her phone and looked at it. Because of Lan, she had an idea of the schedule for this archery competition. Stop reading. I plan to go home and rest for a while. Kurosawa Hikaru shook his head slightly. Regarding the individual semi-finals of the Kanto division and the preliminaries of the team competition, Ichino's Yuki was a little disappointed because she still wanted to continue to be with Brother Hikaru. Okay. However, she thought about it and still didn't bother. There are 2 types of clinginess. One is the clinginess that makes people happy and liked, the other is the clinginess that is inappropriate, regardless of the occasion, and makes people disgusted. Whether it's friends or a couple. Obviously, although Brother Guang has recovered on the surface, he still needs some quiet time alone. If I'm free tomorrow, I'll accompany you to the YG office. Seeing that she was as well behaved and sensible as ever, Kurosawa Hikaru smiled and said the same thing. Counting the time, Yuki's modeling contract has expired. After a visit to the YG office and notifying each other, the matter was completely resolved. In fact, they don't have to go, but for the sake of Xiao Yuki's modeling career, there are no drawbacks, so they still have to take it seriously. Okay, Yuki Ichino's, who originally thought she would see him the day after tomorrow, immediately became energetic when she heard this. It's raining heavily outside, how do you plan to go back? At this moment, Sifenun asked in the future. She was not in a hurry because the day was long and there was still a lot of time. When did it fall? Hearing this, Kurosawa Hikaru's heart skipped a beat. Although the weather is gloomy today, it can't be such a coincidence, right? Did she get caught in the rain? It's been raining for half an hour. Seeing the change in his expression, Sifenun realized that he hadn't come out yet and didn't mind. Fine. Realizing this time, Kurosawa Hikaru thought about it and felt relieved. He was in a daze for an hour, which meant that Chizuru Ninomiya had been gone for an hour. If you think about it carefully, with Ms. Runa by your side, nothing will happen. It rained heavily in Tokyo, and everyone had different feelings about the heavy rain. In such weather, people who can stay at home without going out don't care at all. No matter what kind of weather it is, it will not affect them. He was already the one who had arrived at the company and had brought an umbrella, so he had no worries. This is the long-awaited heavy rain. Summer is already a rainy season, but this year it has been exceptionally dry and hot. Because last month, Tokyo was very hot in July and there was basically no rain. At the entrance of the martial arts hall, some people stopped and some were running back, making it extremely lively. This heavy rain did not come suddenly, but not everyone has the habit of carrying an umbrella, because people will take chances when facing anything. Among the bustling crowd, after the morning's competition, Miki Baiha has been standing at the door of the Budokan. As a strong wind blew between the sky and the earth, the hem of her long dress blew up, revealing a section of her white and tender calves. She stood there, like a landscape painting, which attracted people's attention. However, Miki Baiha didn't pay attention to everyone's gazes. He lowered his head to open the bag and took a look at the two folding umbrellas and a lunch box inside, which made him feel reassured. As expected, it's raining. I wonder if Kurosawa-senpai brought an umbrella. Standing under the eaves, without having to worry about getting caught in the rain, she raised her head and looked at the sky, and then looked at the front door expectantly. While looking forward to it, she was simulating various situations in her mind. For example, Kurosawa-senpai and the members of the Kyoto Club walked out of the door of the Budokan together, looking confused in the face of the heavy rain. Kurosawa-senpai. Senior Miki? Are you coming to watch the game too? A lot of people know that you are going to compete, didn't you bring an umbrella? Yeah, you see I was too careless. Here you go. Wow. The members of the Kyoto Club who saw the scene would make a noise on the side. Thinking of this, Miki Shiraha, who was a little anxious because of waiting, suddenly became a little excited. And she also brought a lunch box, so Senior Kurosawa didn't have to run out to eat. But at this time, the conversation between the two people caught her attention a little. Kurosawa is popular, look at Slack and SNS, the discussion is so high. It's no wonder, Kurosawa is handsome, and the key is that archery is awesome, I don't know when I can shoot as perfectly as him. Impossible, absolutely impossible, the coach said that Kurosawa's shooting is simply textbook level, even the young Ogasawara Juden may not be able to do it to his level, it's simply beautiful as a painting. That muscle, that face, and that bow, that scene reminded me of the first time I saw a bow. The feeling of the competition is very shocking. The key is the aura. Kurosawa is so handsome when he holds a Japanese bow. I have never seen anyone who is so suitable for bows and arrows. Didn't a super popular star take similar promotional photos before? Are you talking about Soma Ayemu? That super handsome star? Yes, Soma Ayemu specializes in posing for photos. There is no comparison with Kurosawa, Kurosawa is too handsome. Hearing this, Miki Baiha was a little eager to take action and took out her mobile phone to go online to watch the fun. However, when she opened the wake-up screen, The first page was Line. It was a Line chat page with the note Senior Kurosawa. There were very few chat messages on it, only a few. Senior, good evening. Good evening. I'm back home after dance practice, what are you busy with? Kyoto competition. Can I go to watch your competition? Of course, as long as you're happy, I should go take a shower and go to bed, I'm a bit busy lately. Okay, go ahead. After adding each other as friends and chatting for a few words, the conversation ended. The last message was sent by her after the morning competition. Unread, Senior Kurosawa, are you still busy? Still unread. Seeing this chat record, Miki Bayu felt sorry, and then she gave up the idea of surfing the internet to watch the fun, and set her sights on the main entrance again. She didn't say that she was waiting for him at the door, because she wanted to give Senior Kurosawa a little surprise, just like the feeling of bumping into him suddenly at the beginning. After waiting for a while, someone came running in the heavy rain. They were two college boys, who came to the eaves at the entrance of the martial arts hall and stopped to rest. They ran for a long distance, panting constantly. The afternoon match starts at 2:30, and there are still 2 minutes. When will Kurosawa go on stage? He shouldn't be the first one, right? A boy took out his phone and took a look, then asked. How can he have a match in the afternoon? I asked. Kurosawa only participated in the individual long-range group, and the next match will be the day after tomorrow morning. The day after tomorrow is the national finals, and players from all over the country will come to Tokyo. The day after tomorrow? Then wouldn't the match this afternoon be boring? Don't say that, the first team players of our school will also have a team match, so we have to cheer them on. That's right. While talking, the two boys also walked into the martial arts hall. While walking, they also deliberately looked straight ahead, but their eyes couldn't help but look at Miki Shiraha on the side. Because this girl is so beautiful, even if she doesn't do anything, just standing there, she is extremely eye-catching. And when they left, this beauty was standing here, and they all went out to eat and came back, and they were still here. Counting it, they have been waiting for almost 2 hours, right? Although they were very concerned, they still didn't go up to chat. Miki Bayu didn't care much about ordinary topics, but when it came to Senior Kurosawa, he couldn't help but look sideways. To cheer for the same school, did Senior Kurosawa not plan to leave from the beginning, but plan to watch the game in the afternoon? Seeing them walk in, Miki Bayu, who had been waiting at the door in vain, seemed to understand. Thinking carefully, although the martial arts hall did not have a cafeteria, this was after all an event for the school to participate in the competition. It was normal for the school to bring some food to the venue and wait for the afternoon game. The game has started. Let's go to the stadium to see if Senior Kurosawa has eaten. Miki Bayu looked inside, then looked at the heavy rain outside, took out his mobile phone and took a look, and found that it was still unread. After careful consideration, he walked in with his bag. Thinking carefully, Senior Kurosawa was wearing a Kyoto hakama. If he had not taken it off, his mobile phone should have been placed in the locker room, so it was normal not to see it. Even though the weather was not good, many people still came to the martial arts hall one after another, including alumni, simple spectators, and more relatives and friends of each player, who came to watch the game despite the heavy rain. There was no one leaving the martial arts hall. After all, the game had begun. It was not until 3 o'clock in the afternoon that a person walked out of the door of the martial arts hall. This person was Kurosawa Hikaru. He looked at the heavy rain outside the eaves and the empty and quiet square, opened an umbrella with an expressionless face, and walked into the heavy rain. Tokyo's most affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 262. Da-da-da. The heavy rain was very noisy, hitting the umbrella and making a crackling sound. Kurosawa Hikaru walked alone in the square. After walking a distance, he couldn't help but look back at the martial arts hall. Even though he tried every means to suppress the emotion in his heart, the heavy rain made the whole world quiet down. There was no one around him, and the heartbroken and guilty feelings were like pervasive, filling his heart. He wanted to look at the present and look forward to the future, but there was a scene that was engraved in his mind like a brand. With the blessing of the master-level painting skills, his memory has long undergone a transformation. Although he is not photographic memory, his brain's graphic memory ability is stronger. As long as he sees it for a little while, he will remember it deeply, and he can use a brush to restore the scenery he has seen. I'm sorry. What he saw was not the martial arts hall, but the image of Chizuru Ninomiya standing with one arm folded, even scratching her left arm to endure, and the picture of her collapse with tears, and the whisper that completely shattered his psychological defenses. Why do you want to say sorry? Kurosawa Hikaru stopped and looked for a long time, feeling annoyed and depressed, unable to let go. It has been nearly 2 hours since they parted, but he still can't figure out what kind of emotions and thoughts Miss Ninomiya apologized for at that time. If Miss Ninomiya slapped him, or even slapped him several times, and left angrily, he would feel better. If she, who was elegant and noble, couldn't do anything because of her upbringing, and scolded him, he would feel better. But her emotions were too complicated, so complicated that people couldn't guess what kind of mental journey she had in that short time. From the angry voice at the beginning, to the disbelief when she saw Xiaoyuji, and the silence because there were outsiders watching, in order not to make things too ugly, until the face-to-face confrontation, the questioning with many emotions piled up. Even more, even in such an extreme emotional situation, she still retained her rationality and let herself meet Shifunjayuan Zhenlong, not wanting him to be embarrassed. After thinking alone, she was suspicious and had unfounded fantasies. As elegant and mature as she was, she finally fought with Xiaoyuji, but she couldn't scold or beat him, and she cried heartbreakingly and aggrievedly. Finally, when he returned and realized that their relationship was limited to the first kiss, she calmed down, and even after Shifunjayuan Mirai appeared, she took the initiative to kiss to show her attitude and determination. But in this case, his kiss completely broke Miss Ninomiya's psychological defenses and completely collapsed. As the saying goes, one effort will weaken the next and exhaust the next. Even if Miss Ninomiya's feelings for him were sincere, she, who loved jealousy, could not accept his continuous blows and chose to turn around and leave. Thinking of her half-step back when he took a step closer, Kurosawa Mitsuru stood under the heavy rain with an umbrella and sighed. He was not a person who liked to sigh, because sighing could not solve the problem. But at this moment, he could do nothing but sigh. This matter was indeed too difficult to accept. I wonder what kind of mental struggle Xiaoyuki went through before accepting this matter. Suddenly, Kurosawa Mitsuru thought of another question. Although Xiaoyuki's expression and reaction returned to her usual appearance when she was eating just now, she was cute and energetic, soft and cute and loved to act like a spoiled child. But even a girl with such traditional ideas as Shifunjayuan Mirai would be jealous, let alone her. Xiaoyuki would be jealous and sad. What's more, she was very sensitive and fragile. The first sentence she said when she came to the backstage and hugged him was to beg him not to leave her. During the confrontation, facing his apology, Xiaoyuki cried at that time. She also cried once after fighting with Miss Ninomiya. When he hurried back after meeting Shifunjayuan Zhenlong, the crying Xiaoyuki's first reaction was to run over and hug him. Because he was always worried about Ninomiya Chizuru at that time, and wanted to understand the situation, he didn't pay much attention to Xiaoyuki's situation. Thinking back carefully, Xiaoyuki's body was shaking constantly when she hugged him. Thinking of today's scenes, Kurosawa Mitsuru suddenly found himself in the Shura field. He had little care for Xiaoyuki and few words to comfort her. Suddenly thinking of his own response and handling, Kurosawa Mitsuru fell into reflection. Is it because I thought she was more likely to accept this at the beginning, so I have been fighting for Miss Ninomiya? It can't be like this. Kurosawa Mitsuru realized his response and regretted it. Xiaoyuki was hurt once by school bullying in junior high school. She only looked smiling and cheerful on the surface, but she was actually very fragile and lacked love more than anyone else. She was very sensitive to Miss Runa's tracking and could detect it in an instant. This shows that she is very sensitive to other people's sight. Is she really stupid? That's not the case at all. She just neglected her studies and didn't understand the knowledge in learning. She disguised herself as a hot girl and mixed in the hot girl circle for more than a year. She was able to keep herself clean all the time. She pretended to have a boyfriend because she had concealed it for too long. It was really because she couldn't hide it anymore that she aroused suspicion. This shows what? She is actually very good at disguising herself, protecting herself, and knowing how to read people's emotions. What's more, when she was filming in the hotel last time, she realized that YG agency had been deceiving her all along, and her reaction was not very enthusiastic. She had a strong heart and didn't care about it at all, and she was still in a good mood. Even if he had a showdown with YG agency and broke his skin, Yuki would still fulfill the contract and continue shooting photos with the dull photography team. She is stronger than she looks on the surface. She was bullied in junior high school, and even until recently, she had been suffering from the cold looks of others, and she didn't care. She used the disguise of a hot girl to live her own life. But even though she was so strong, she still cried today, twice. I'm afraid that for Xiaoyuki, he was the only weakness. Even though he knew he had to share it with two women, because he couldn't change his mind, he still made the biggest compromise in order to be with him. She should be with Lan now. Let's spend some time with her tomorrow. The more he thought about it, the more guilty he felt. Kurosawa looked at the martial arts hall and had the urge to go back, but he quickly suppressed it. No, did she really go to see Lan after she separated from me? But the next moment, he suddenly thought of another possibility, and his expression suddenly changed. He didn't know how Xiaoyuki got through the bullying, despair and pain when she was in junior high school, and he didn't know what she would do when she was sad. Because in front of him, Xiaoyuki is always smiling whenever she sees him. That sweet smile heals people's hearts, just like a carefree pistachio, which can make him happy. Realizing this possibility, Kurosawa Hikaru immediately took up his steps and started running. Because it was too slow to run with an umbrella in the wind and heavy rain, he simply threw it away and ran in the rain. Does Miss Ninomiya love him? Like. Miss Ninomiya compromised and gave in again and again for him. This love was so great that she couldn't bear to share it with others. She turned around and left completely collapsed, unable to tolerate the sand in her eyes. Does Xiaoyuki love him? Like. Even though Xiaoyuki faced the hurt caused by his confession, she hugged him again and again, and got close again and again. Even if he was bruised all over his body, he never looked back. This love was such that even though she knew he was a playboy, she was still passionately devoted, had no regrets, and just wanted to be with him. But having no complaints or regrets does not mean that she is not sad, does not mean that she is not injured, and does not mean that she will not suffer. What's more, in order to make him happy, when Miss Ninomiya turned around and left, she begged him to chase her back. Miss Ninomiya turned around and left with bruises all over her body. He had to respect this choice. Even if he wanted to keep her, he didn't have the courage, but Xiaoyuki was still by his side, and he could care for her and comfort her. He was really crazy. He was completely immersed in the sadness of Miss Ninomiya turning around and leaving. He completely failed to notice what kind of mood was behind Xiaoyuki's smile. Because Xiaoyuki seemed to have nothing to do with her on the surface, he just wanted to go home quickly, stay alone, and lick his wounds alone. Kurosawa Hikaru was like a wild beast, braving the heavy rain, and ran back to the Budokan. "Kurosawa, what's wrong with you?" Back at the martial arts hall, the female staff member standing guard by the gate was shocked to see his hair completely wet and his anxious expression. This Kurosawa player has become the big star of today's Budokan, because the 3 arrows in the morning were the best in the field. "Sorry, I'm fine." Faced with her concern, Kurosawa Hikaru responded to her and then continued running. His footsteps were very fast, and it was like a gust of wind whistling as he ran wildly. The Budokan is designed in an octagonal shape. Although the interior is spacious, it is intricate. Feel sorry. Going through one corner after another, because he ran too fast, he scared and affected others, and he kept apologizing along the way. He walked through an area that was cordoned off by staff and had a gaping hole in the wall. Until the end, there were fewer and fewer people. Kurosawa Hikaru braked suddenly and finally returned to the place where his dreams were broken. He didn't want to stay in the place of right and wrong for a long time. Kurosawa Hikaru raised his head and saw that Sayuki was indeed staying where he was. She didn't leave the place where she just ate, nor did she go to find Lan as she said before. She squatted against the wall, hugged her knees with her hands, and buried her head in her legs. Her long, wavy golden hair hung down on both sides, invisible. Her expression and face. He really guessed it right, but he was not happy at all. Because Sayuki's figure is lonely and helpless, like an injured cat hiding in a dark corner, shivering and curling up. She was crying with her head buried in her head, and her body would twitch from time to time, which was silent sobbing. "Yuki-chan." After being stunned, Kurosawa Hikaru came to his senses and walked forward with great distress, calling her name. This voice made Ichino's Yuki raise her head and look at him. She couldn't help but be stunned, her eyes full of surprise and confusion. "Brother Guang, why are you back?" Immediately afterwards, Ichino's Yuki saw him walking over step by step, quickly wiped the tears on his face with his hand, and asked with a smile. However, her voice was a little hoarse and low, which was the sound of crying. Even if her acting skills were good and she was good at disguising herself, it was difficult to cover it up. 2 more chapters are here. I will check my status and ideas to see if there will be more chapters in the evening. I am very sorry, chapters 252-255 have been rewritten. Please go back and check if the content is that Ninomiya Chizuru has left. It is the revised version. If not, it means that the app is stuck. The web version can see the rewritten version. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 263. I'm sorry. Seeing her forced smile, Kurosawa Hikaru quickened his pace, opened his arms and hugged her. "Brother Hikaru, don't say sorry, I won't cry anymore." This heavy hug and his low apology made Ichino's Yuki panic. Just now, Brother Hikaru was in a daze for an hour, and finally returned to his usual self. Why did he change back now? She wanted to see Brother Hikaru earlier, and become mature, confident, handsome and charming as before. "Cry if you want to cry, I will always be with you, don't be afraid." Kurosawa Hikaru hugged her and felt her trembling, as if he had touched her heart for the first time. Under Yuki's sunny appearance, there was a timid, inferior, and extremely scared heart. Because Yuki has always been sunny, positive, cute, and lively, he was also deceived by this appearance. Yuki, who had been bullied before, could be like now, sunny, lively and cute. How much effort did she put in, and how much suffering and pain did she endure? Facing the harm of others, she wanted to fight back, but she was powerless and could only accept it. Facing bullying, she was obviously a good girl, but she was forced to pretend to be a hot girl, using this shell to protect herself and prevent others from hurting her. In the eyes of ordinary people, hot girls and bad girls are very similar groups, both of which are uneducated, arbitrary, and dangerous groups that feel they can do anything. Others will stay away from Xiao Yuji because she is a hot girl, and dare not provoke her, but she has to take the initiative to approach the hot girls, or even join them. And the purpose of her doing this is just to let herself live a normal life. In terms of the result, Xiao Yuji is very lucky. She met 3 hot girls, Aoi, Lan, and Tong. Although these 3 hot girls play very flowery, they are really not bad people. When Ichino's Yuki heard him say don't be afraid, her delicate body trembled, and the tears that were finally suppressed suddenly burst out like a dam bursting. Brother Guang. Ichino's Yuki opened her arms, held him tightly with both hands, buried her head in his shoulders, and called his name with great grievance. At this moment, the uncontrollable anxiety and fear that had been suppressed in her heart for a long time completely broke out. Ever since Brother Guang suddenly called and said that she would see the real him in the Kyoto tournament and that he had done something wrong, the sudden words made her feel unprecedented fear. This time, the fear was even more terrifying than the bullying she had suffered at the beginning. Because of the bullying at the beginning, she knew it was fake, she was not wrong, but was framed by someone. But this time, she didn't know what happened to Brother Guang at all. Obviously everything should be fine. They also agreed to go to YG office together after the summer vacation, go to the beach together, and play with Lan and the others. Obviously she was very good and obedient. She racked her brains to think, but she couldn't think of what she had done wrong. Brother Guang's coldness and alienation made her very scared, she was really afraid that Brother Guang would leave her. In order to pursue peace of mind, she took very extreme actions, which were also the actions she hated the most, that is, tracking and stalking. She followed Guang Ji just to find out where his home address was and to seek peace of mind. Because in this way, even if Guang Ji didn't reply to her messages or answer her calls in the future, she would be able to find Guang Ji. It turned out that this was very effective and she felt much more at ease. However, after watching the game, she saw that Guang Ji had a good relationship with Sato Juden, and thought that he might know such an outstanding girl like Shifunja Yuan Mirai, and the fear surged again, forcing her to run backstage. When she learned that Guang Ji was a playboy and had other women besides her, her first reaction was that the sky had fallen. Even though she had never shed a tear since the bullying in junior high school, no matter what kind of hardships and grievances she faced, she couldn't help crying at that moment. In the face of pain, she was used to hiding it, because if she showed pain, she would only face more terrible bullying and harm. But at that time, she suddenly found that Guang Ji was very strange, and her relationship with Guang Ji was not as good as she imagined, and she didn't know Guang Ji at all. She cried at that time, but she also suppressed her emotions, just crying silently, without making a sound, and without anger, until Guang Ji kissed her forehead and pulled her back to reality. Hope rekindled in her heart, that is, even if Guang Ji became very strange, he was still him, and he promised her that she would not leave and he would not abandon her. As long as she did not leave, she could continue to be with Guang Ji, so she had found the answer at that moment. But later, she saw Guang Ji kissing Ninomiya Chizuru's forehead, and she couldn't help being jealous. When Guang Ji left for something, she fought with Ninomiya Chizuru, and she couldn't help seeing the other crying. Because she thought that if the other cried, she could cry too. Later, Ninomiya Chizuru suddenly kissed Guang Ji, and she was very jealous and couldn't help jumping out to kiss him, and seeing Guang Ji also kiss Shifunja Yuan Mirai, she simply turned around and covered her eyes, pretending that it didn't happen. Brother Guang does not belong to her alone, but to someone else. She accepts this, but how can she not be sad and upset? But she really didn't dare to make trouble, lose her temper, get jealous, or even cry. She was afraid that Brother Guang would hate her because of this and think that she chose to leave. Until just now, After Brother Guang and Si Fenyuan left in the future, she was the only one who stayed where she was, looking at this sad place. She dared to cry and grieve alone. Woo! As she vented her anger, Ichi-nose Yuki's cries went from a subtle whisper to a full-blown cry, a heartbreaking cry, and it continued to progress, as if the grievances and sadness in her heart were endless. Emerged. Not only that, Kurosawa Hikaru also felt her hands tightly grasping the clothes on his back getting stronger and stronger. Sorry. Listening to such cries and looking at little Yuki in his arms, Kurosawa Hikaru felt extremely heartbroken and guilty. He didn't know what words he should use to comfort her, because he had a lot on his mind at this moment. Last week, he vaccinated Xiao Yuki and Miss Ninomiya to prepare them mentally. Facing the inevitable archery competition, he felt tortured in his heart, hesitant, uneasy, looking forward to it, regretting it, worrying about gains and losses, feeling deeply troubled, and having trouble sleeping and eating. But this is not the case for Xiao Yuki and Miss Ninomiya. In this case, Xiao Yuki chose to do nothing and wait obediently, but this did not mean that she was happy these days. As for Miss Ninomiya, she didn't know what she was thinking, but she resolutely chose to resign, just like cutting off her will. This crying continued for a long time, until Ichi-nose Yuki's voice became hoarse from crying, and then she gradually calmed down. Brother Guang, can you please stop ignoring me from now on? I've been really scared during this time, so scared that you will leave me like this. Ichi-nose Yuki hugged him tightly, raised her head, and pleaded with tears in her eyes. Even if the sky falls in the future, I will not ignore you. I'm sorry, I thought I reminded you that if you never leave me, you will feel at ease. Kurosawa Hikaru saw that she still didn't lose his temper, but had this attitude, and nodded in agreement, feeling deeply guilty. How can I feel at ease? I felt a little more at ease after I followed you, found your home address, and found out where you live. Yuki Ichi-nose shook her head and said. Have you ever stalked me? Did you send me a sorry message before because you felt uneasy about your conscience after stalking me? Kurosawa Hikaru was stunned when he heard this, and suddenly remembered something. Will you blame me? Ichi-nose Yuki didn't dare to hide it from him. Seeing his expression, she whispered. No, there's nothing strange about this. Hearing her hoarse crying voice, Kurosawa Hikaru couldn't help but feel distressed. He couldn't bear to blame her and immediately shook his head. Ichi-nose Yuki was relieved to see that he was not angry. In fact, when she followed him to the door of her house, she thought about jumping out to meet and talk to Brother Guang. It's just that she was afraid that her following would make Brother Guang angry, so she didn't dare to show up until the end. If you want to know something, just ask me directly. Kurosawa Hikaru saw that she finally stopped crying, reached out to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said softly. He was lucky to meet such a good girl like Xiao Yuki in his life. In this matter, he sincerely thanked the system for its emergence, otherwise, when they had their first video chat, he would never have agreed to Xiao Yuki's request, but refused, because he was not interested in the group of hot girls. Not interested? But you didn't tell me your address last time I asked you. Hearing this statement, Ichi-nose Yuki couldn't help complaining. It was already night, and you said you wanted to find me, and you said you would give me everything. I felt like I didn't have the face to meet you. When it comes to this matter, Kurosawa Hikaru is at a loss. If Xiao Yuki hadn't said anything like, I want to see you, I'll give you everything, he might have said it. Sorry. Ichi-nose Yuki couldn't help but feel a little hot when she recalled her reaction and the message she sent out at that time. At that time, she was really scared, so she wanted to keep Brother Guang at all costs. This apology made Kurosawa Hikaru's heartstrings tremble, and Miss Ninomiya appeared before his eyes again. I don't blame you, no need to apologize. However, when Kurosawa Hikaru saw little Yuki in his arms, he forcibly suppressed the scene and comforted him. Then Brother Guang, don't apologize in the future, even if you do something wrong. Ichi-nose Yuki nodded, then raised her head, came in front of him, looked at him, and warned him seriously. If you do something wrong, you still have to apologize. Staring closely at her beautiful blue eyes, Kurosawa Hikaru also responded seriously. Anyway, don't apologize. No matter what happens, you can just coax me like you are now. I'm easy to coax. Ichi-nose Yuki shook her head, then leaned into his arms and said coquettishly. How could there be someone as stupid as you? Seeing her burying her head in his arms, Kurosawa Hikaru felt dumbfounded. Things that are too easy to obtain are often not cherished by others. Doesn't she know this truth? Although he has become aware after this time, he will never underestimate her feelings in the future, and will cherish this cute silly girl even more. I'm not stupid. Ichi-nose Yuki, who buried her head in his arms and sniffed Brother Guang's energy, looked up at him after hearing this. If you have any grievances in the future, you must speak out, and don't do it like today. Kurosawa Guang knew that she was not stupid, so he smiled, held her cheeks with both hands, and also admonished her. Yet Ichi-nose Yuki thought about it and nodded. So good. Seeing her well-behaved and sensible look, Kurosawa Guang felt relieved and fortunate, sighed, and lowered his head to kiss her lips. Ichi-nose Yuki was startled by her lips being blocked suddenly, and then the corners of her eyes, which were red and swollen from crying, curved up, and she was extremely happy. Because through this kiss, she felt that Brother Guang loved her, cherished her, and spoiled her. The third update is here, which is an extra update for 2,100 monthly tickets. Tokyo's Most Affectionate. Author, Wodada Shuchu Wujin. Chapter 264. After hugging and kissing for a while, the two sat against the wall. Kurosawa Hikaru's mood improved. Because he noticed Xiao Yuki's situation and guessed it right, he made timely remedies. Today's events cannot be turned over so quickly, and it will take time to wash away before it slowly fades. I remember you said that your reputation in school has improved during this period. After thinking about it, Kurosawa Hikaru remembered the messages Xiao Yuki sent during this period and asked. At first, he didn't care too much about it, just thought that things got better, but now thinking back, this matter is probably a particularly exciting thing for Xiao Yuki. Some of the first-year juniors and juniors have started to call me senior sister. Some classmates in the same class have also started to greet me. Talking about this, a smile suddenly appeared on Ichi-nose Yuki's face. Then you change your image next semester, like now, wouldn't it be better? Seeing that she likes this very much, Kurosawa Hikaru also strikes while the iron is hot. Hearing this, Yuki Ichi-nose did not speak, but stood up and turned around in front of him. She was wearing a light chiffon dress, and as she turned around quickly, the hem of her skirt fluttered, making her look particularly cute and beautiful. Her white, slender, and beautifully proportioned calves under the hem of her skirt were also extremely eye-catching. Does it look good? After showing it off, Yuki Ichi-nose asked. Like a fairy. Discovering that she was quite particular about the sense of ceremony, Kurosawa Hikaru was a little happy and proud, and looked at her seriously. I have to say that her outfit was really sweet, both youthful and beautiful, and absolutely beautiful, just like a fairy. Hee hee. Hearing this compliment and recognition, Yuki Ichi-nose smiled and was satisfied. I originally wanted to wear the stockings you gave me, but my makeup skills are not as good as yours. If it's not a queen makeup, other clothes don't match the stockings very well. Only the hot girl look is barely suitable. I thought about it and gave up. Immediately, she sat back next to Kurosawa Hikaru and said a little ashamed. She is obviously a hot girl, but her makeup skills are not as good as Brother Hikaru. Why give up? Because this is a national university competition. I thought that if I support you, if your classmates see me as a hot girl, they may have a bad impression of you. How could there be a bad impression? My girlfriend is so beautiful, they can't envy her. Realizing her intentions, Kurosawa Hikaru shrugged and didn't care. Just kidding, Xiao Yuki is so cute and beautiful, who would envy them when they are together? Although I said that, I still don't want to embarrass you. You are so beautiful, even if you are wearing a plastic bag, you won't be embarrassed to stand next to me. Kurosawa Hikaru realized that she was entangled in this matter and said immediately. How can I wear a plastic bag? Ichino's Yuki was a little speechless. Ha ha ha. Kurosawa Hikari saw that she didn't understand and couldn't help laughing. Brother Hikari, do you want me to wear a plastic bag? No, what I mean is that even if a beautiful woman wears a plastic bag, it can't change the fact that she is a beautiful woman. Yeah. Realizing that he was praising her beauty in a roundabout way, Ichino's Yuki nodded as if she had understood something. Brother Hikari, I have something that bothers me. Then, she turned her head to look at Brother Hikari beside her, thought about it and said. What? When these words came out, Kurosawa Hikari's heartbeat accelerated a little. Could it be that he was going to repeat the story? I plan to study hard this summer and work hard to become better next semester, but if I do this, I feel like I'm betraying them. Ichino's Yuki nodded, said what she was thinking, bent her legs and bowed her head on her knees, a little worried. Them. Kurosawa Hikari realized this worry and also understood it. This them refers to the hot girl trio, Aoi, Aoi, and Hitomi. They are really nice to me. Yuki Ichino's nodded slightly. Perhaps she has only been friends with everyone for more than a year, and it started in high school. But in this year or so, she went from being afraid at the beginning to finding that everyone was very nice to her, and this friendship was very sincere. Sensing her troubles, Kurosawa Hikaru did not respond directly, but fell into deep thought. In fact, birds of a feather flock together, and people are divided into groups. This is the truth. For example, in the circle of top students, if you are not a top student, you will only be out of place. For example, in the circle of poor students, if you are not a poor student, you will also be out of place. In short, the problem that Xiao Yuki is worried about is that if she works hard for her future and life, it is equivalent to leaving the hot girl group that praises youth. Will it make them feel that she is betraying them? After finding the essence of the problem, Kurosawa Hikaru spoke. True friends encourage and support each other. Even if you go separate ways for some reason, such as going to different schools, you can still sit down and have a good chat when you meet again. When you are down, friends will give you a hand, and when you hesitate and stand still, they will give you a push. Such people are true friends. Brother Hikaru, can you put it more simply? Although Yuki Ichino's wanted to talk to him and ask for help, he was confused by these words. Overall, she could understand the sentence, which was a so-called friend, but she always felt that the meaning of Brother Guang's words was not that simple. Humans are creatures that are easy to satisfy but difficult to be satisfied. Most people will choose to stay in their comfort zone and be content with limited beauty. But this situation is like boiling a frog in warm water. They are happy and beautiful at the moment. But the result may not be satisfactory. Seeing that she didn't understand for a moment, Kurosawa just glanced at her, smiled and said again. Oh. Ichino's Yuki seemed to have some realization. Everyone does not study every day, but just hangs out and plays every day. It is indeed very interesting and carefree, but it is wonderful now, but what about in a few years? What about 10 years from now? If they really treat you as a friend, then if you become better, they will not feel that you are betraying. On the contrary, if you become better, your actions and progress will see that you will have a bright future. This may inspire and remind them that everyone is growing up and the world is changing. They must work harder and step out of their comfort zone to achieve better results. Kurosawa Hikaru didn't ask her to understand now, he just reminded her. It is impossible to change other people's minds with just a few words. Because a person's thoughts are formed over many years. If you want to change your thoughts, you must make a transition. I see, that is to say, I stepped out of my comfort zone and started to get better, which is equivalent to pulling them and pushing them. Hearing this, Ichi-nose Yuki understood something. We are indeed very happy now as we sing about our youth, but if we look to the future, it is all gloomy. If you have no goals in life, no career plans, and in 1.5 years, you will not be able to go to college because your academic performance is too poor, what will you be doing at that time? You don't have to worry too much about them. Everyone has their own life. If you want to become better, you must work hard. You don't need to ask about the results. As long as you look back decades later, what do you think yours is? There is nothing wrong with the choice, as long as you have a clear conscience. Seeing that she finally understood, Kurosawa reached out and rubbed her head. Although this girl's academic performance is very poor and she is a scumbag among scumbags, she is still quite smart. Ichi-nose Yuki nodded, already finding the answer. In this life, people will experience many things, including happiness and joy, as well as ups and downs. They will also meet countless people and have all kinds of strange relationships. Not all relationships can go to the end. They can stay with you for many years. There are very few friends in this life, so there is no need to force it. Kurosawa thought for a while and decided to vaccinate her. He couldn't tell whether those 3 hot girls were willing to get better. He could only stay with Xiaoyuki and get better with her. Even if many relationships cannot last a lifetime, I want to finish this life with you. Naturally, Ichi-nose Yuki understood this truth and plucked up the courage to speak. Me too. Seeing her pretty face turn slightly red, obviously she was a bit shy about this confession, Kurosawa was stunned for a moment, feeling happy and honored. Hey! Facing his smiling and doting gaze, Ichi-nose Yuki reached out and kissed him on the face, then stood up. Then, she took 5 or 6 steps, turned around and smiled. Her smile was bright, like the relief after all the troubles disappeared. Does this mean she is determined to step out of her comfort zone and move forward? Seeing this sudden movement and her smile, Kurosawa Hikaru thought with some understanding. It has to be said that Xiaoyuki really has a talent for being a model. Whether it is facial expressions, language, or body language, she will show it. In addition, she has trained her body for being a model and has that natural beauty. I've already stepped out. Brother Guang, you have to work harder and get out of your comfort zone as soon as possible. At the same time, Ichi-nose Yuki reminded him seriously. Kurosawa Hikaru was a little shocked when he heard this. When did he stay in his comfort zone? Since he was reincarnated into Neon, he has been working hard to make himself better, so as not to make the same mistakes as in his previous life. Yes. Yuki Ichi-nose nodded and stared at his face. Maybe now that Brother Guang is with her, he can laugh naturally. His voice is very gentle, just like before, mature and warm, which makes her feel comfortable and fascinates her. But in his smile and in the depths of his eyes, there was always a layer of haze that was difficult to erase. He was not as happy as before, not as dazzling as before, like a sparkling diamond with one side covered with dust. Maybe if you don't wipe off the dust, a diamond will still be a diamond and will sparkle, but there will always be a dull side. She knew what the dust on this side meant. It was not easy to wipe it off, and it even had to pay a price. But even so, she still wanted to wipe away the dust, as long as she could restore Brother Guang's energy, as relaxed, confident, and charming as before. Ever since they met, Brother Guang has been helping her, making her better, more confident, and happier. This time it was her turn. Am I staying in my comfort zone? Kurosawa Hikaru wondered. Right. Seeing that he was completely unaware, Ichi-nose Yuki smiled. Is this what the authorities are obsessed with, but bystanders are clear? When Brother Guan was counseling her, he could see things clearly, but he couldn't see himself clearly.